Welcome to The Long Way Round. I'm your host, Malcolm Byrne. It's good to be back live on the radio. I've been away for a couple of weeks doing my show remotely, and it's good to be back in the saddle, so to speak. Tonight, my very special guest is Wyatt Reed. Wyatt Reed is managing editor of the Greyzone news site and a correspondent covering the end of empire. The Greyzone is an independent news website dedicated to original investigative journalism and analysis on politics and empire. And you can follow Wyatt on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Wyatt Reed 13. That's WYATTREED 13. His work, numeric 13, that is. His work can be found at thegreyzone.com. Wyatt, welcome to The Long Way Round. I've been following you for quite some time now, and I'm a big fan of the Greyzone, of course. And
well, thank you. It's great to be on with you, Malcolm. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm sorry we sort of missed a few opportunities recently in the past, but here we are now, so that's the most important thing. And, the thing is, the Greyzone is very well known to me. I've been following the Greyzone for, been a long number of years, but I'm astounded how many people still don't know about it. Case in point would be Aaron Mate last week confronted, as you probably know, the Delaware Senator Chris Coons on an Amtrak train about Gaza, and Coons claimed not to know about the outlet. So I imagine if I'm a U.S. Senator supposedly educated, I didn't know about the Greyzone, then I guess it's not surprising that the average American doesn't know about you guys either. But would you tell my listeners about the Greyzone, and how did you come to be involved with them?
Yeah, well, I think of the Greyzone as really one of the premier anti-establishment news outlets, really, that's out there. It's honestly an honor to be able to work alongside my colleagues there. We kind of do the journalism. I like to think that basically no one else is willing or able to on really matters of empire that ultimately do affect people back home. I mean, obviously, if you've been living here for the past few years, you understand how much less affordable everything's gotten. And meanwhile, we still have obviously hundreds of billions of dollars to dispense on proxy wars. And unfortunately, the corporate press is unwilling or unable to hold any of the people responsible to account. So that's where we step in. And Aaron managing to ask really important senator from President Biden's state of Delaware about his refusal, why he refuses to call for a ceasefire. He had the police throw Aaron off of the train for having the gall to ask him this question on the quiet train of all places.
Yes,
I told him you had to respect. He's breaking the basic norms of the quiet car of the Amtrak, while he's breaking international law left and right by supplying what now can only really be deemed a rogue state with more and more weapons.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to talk to you about the dangers of wartime journalism, and I know you've experienced a bit of that. My friend Chris Hedges has talked about this at length on my show and has written extensively about it. And he says that one is never the same after being involved in the midst of a war zone. How did you become interested in this type of journalism, and why were you drawn to it?
Well, I was drawn to it because I had the good fortune of being able to spend quite some time in Latin America and especially Nicaragua. But I've been to, I would say, at least half of the countries in South and Central America now, thanks to my work in large part, but also just because it was always a region that fascinated me. And it's always a region that's really existed historically through the lens of the United States as its backyard, right? Since the Monroe Doctrine, the United States has viewed Latin America as basically its plaything, its source of resources and of cheap labor. And it's historically done everything in its power to maintain that kind of relationship with Latin America. That's obviously something we're seeing even today with the resurgence of this bizarre anarcho-capitalist character, Javier Milei in Argentina, which a man who has basically promised to privatize everything and eradicate the central bank and all trade with Brazil and China, who he views as communists and therefore should not have trade relations, apparently. This is who's running, Argentina now. So obviously, from the perspective of the United States, this is going to be beneficial. But this is something I got drawn into, especially in 2019 during the coup d'etat in Bolivia, in which the country's first indigenous president, Evo Morales, was overthrown by the military in a coup that was immediately recognized by the United States, almost as if by design. And the country was plunged into about a year of total erosion of democracy, an authoritarian, theocratic, fascist government that was not only incredibly racist in its policy towards the indigenous majority that makes up Bolivia, but it was also totally inept and super corrupt. Luckily, that was something that, for me, that was the first time I covered a conflict up close, and I covered it for the Greyzone, actually. And it was a really eye-opening experience. I was able to show up to the working class city of El Alto, the sister city of La Paz, and which is obviously the biggest city of Bolivia, and kind of the major nerve center, if you will. And at the time, the indigenous people in El Alto had basically risen up in support of their deposed president, and they had blocked access to a central gas plant. And the military dictatorship, which approved itself, gave permission to soldiers to basically shoot to kill, and said they wouldn't be charged with any crimes. It was an open invitation to mass murder, and that's exactly what happened. And I was in El Alto that day, and I was able to document what transpired. I went to the hospital, and there were no Western journalists to speak of. There were just really me and a handful of colleagues. Camila Escalante, who at that time was working for Telesur, and went on to help found Causachum News, which is a really great, indispensable outlet for Latin American affairs.
How do you spell it? What? Sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry, that's KAWSACHUN News.
Oh, okay, because I'd like listeners to be able to navigate towards that. Yeah.
Great. Great source of news in terms of Bolivia, especially. And we were able, though, to document that night the mothers coming to this hospital, finding out that their kids had been mowed down from by commandos and helicopters, uh, many of them simply for the crime of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, walking to school or to work. Um, and you know, this type of massacre repeated itself throughout the country. Again, in Sacaba, or that happened previously. So this massacre was the second such massacre, and it really kind of opened my eyes at the time to what our foreign policy establishment is willing to do to subject a given country to another colonial style relationship, and also the human side of that. And then it also gave me a lot of insight into the total failure of legacy media, what's called the mainstream media, to cover this crucial stuff. And so that was really where I kind of got started, my first sort of conflict type journalism. And from then on, I was just like, okay, well, if there's some conflict going on that's being covered up or covered from a extremely biased perspective by the establishment media, well, then like, why not go if I can, and just see for myself and show the rest of the world what I see.
Well, in the immortal words of the original Star Trek, to boldly go where no man or woman has gone before. Because it's stunning to me how underreported, for example, what you just described. In fact, it's almost as if it doesn't exist in mainstream media. You just don't hear anything, like nothing at all, about these kinds of situations. I mean, what's going on in Nicaragua, what's going on in Chile, what's happening in even Argentina, Bolivia, Ecuador. It's almost as if there's and I could be being a little conspiratorial, but it's almost like a compact between the media and the government to just do not discuss.
Well, it's partly that, and it's also just, it's not, it takes a certain, I don't know, type of person, I guess, to want to even get engaged on this on some level, because it can seem so abstract, it can seem kind of out there. But these kind of economic relationships are going to fundamentally shape how we relate to the rest of the American continent for the rest of our lives and for far beyond that. I mean, it's uh, and this is the type of thing where, I mean, people don't really grasp the fact that we live now in kind of a post-U.S. dominated order, right? The various factions in the world that are feuding now. I mean, you look at, for example, the Iranians and the Saudis when they wanted to establish a diplomatic rapprochement after nearly a decade of not having any diplomatic relations at all. Who did they turn to? Well, they turned to China. You know, that's what we're seeing now, especially behind the scenes. That's who diplomatic relations are moving away from the United States. This is kind of a long-term thing, but this is going to involve a reorientation of the United States economically. We're not going to be able to dominate the rest of the world, and I think long term that means the people in charge are going to want to try to redominate Latin America again, pretty seriously. So that's something to look out for, I think,
Well,
especially when we talk about Milei winning today.
well, as Chris Hedges often points out, we're seeing he's written several books on the subject, really the end of empire, so to speak, and that he makes very distinct parallels between, say, the Roman Empire or the Ottoman Empire, where the British Empire, they don't go down quietly. They seem to go down kicking and screaming and kind of doing as much destruction in the process as possible. And at the risk of sounding somewhat hysterical, I think we're sort of really getting into that stage with the United States.
Well, yeah, the problem with that is, the Romans, they didn't have nuclear weapons, so it's
Right, they had a
it's
bunch
a
of
little
swords.
concerning.
Yeah, they
You
didn't.
know,
Certainly.
what exactly are they gonna be able to do? Are they gonna go full Doctor Strangelove on us? I mean, it remains to be seen, and I think there's a real danger right now, especially with already tensions already inflamed between East and West over Ukraine, obviously. And it's not just East and West, it's really the United States and Canada and most of Europe, and the rest of the world, basically. Um, that's kind of the reality. When they talk about the international community, they're just talking about the US and Europe, basically. But who's to say, that I think the other side is basically reasserting itself, and unfortunately there's a danger of really real danger right now of this Gaza conflict, this terrible massacre that's being carried out, of the Israelis trying to drag us to some situation that looks exactly like that, exactly, potentially nuclear conflict. And it's really become something that's normalized in the discourse now, talking about potential tactical nuclear strikes, and it's definitely a dangerous moment for, obviously, all of the Palestinians suffering, but then for regional escalations. uh, I think Aaron was right when he said the best thing possible is a ceasefire, and is very right to ask uh, our so-called representatives and senators why they're not working their utmost. It's obviously popular with the American people. 3/4 of Democrats support it. 50% of Republicans support it. Something like 3% of Congress supports it.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think there's only one. Uh, gosh, she's she's very outspoken. I mean, I think she's of Palestinian origin. She's a congressperson.
Rashida Tlaib.
Exactly, and she keeps getting. They keep getting shut down. I heard of her being shut down just yesterday to do a speaking engagement. I wanted to ask you, shifting gears just a little bit, about your harrowing experience when you were staying in a hotel in Donetsk last year, uh, where you were almost killed and then kind of saved by a cup of coffee or something because you had just gone out. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, no, saved by a restaurant being closed, I guess. Um, who knows? Saved by briefly stopping to take a look, I think, at another restaurant, going up the wrong street for a minute, uh, by my own poor sense of direction, perhaps. Yeah, I was reporting from Donetsk, which is a city uh, pre-war, pre 2014, pre civil war in Ukraine, population of around 1 million. I'm not sure if it's really possible to get a handle of the exact number of people living there today, but it's still quite a large city, very much functioning to the best of its ability. But it is former Ukraine, now controlled by Russia. So it's right on the front lines, effectively, about 15 kilometers or so from the front lines between Ukrainian and Russian forces. And so to this day, as it has since 2014, Donetsk gets shelled by the Ukrainian forces, as what they termed at the time in 2014 an anti-terror operation, but which residents of Donetsk describe as terrorism. they regularly shell downtown civilian areas when they are suffering military setbacks in the area. And so as I arrived to downtown Donetsk, I finally got to a hotel that had space and walked out. It's called the Donbass Palace. It's right downtown Donetsk. Walked out trying to get a bite to eat, which I knew was kind of a fool's errand. They have a curfew in Donetsk because of the war, and so I knew it was kind of a long shot. But went out looking for a bite to eat, thinking, okay, this is, seems like it's a war happening, but it could be relatively distant. And as I'm walking back, the restaurant was closed. About 100 meters in front of me, a massive explosion, an artillery strike hit the corner, the intersection where my hotel was on, right in front of me as I'm walking back. So I obviously ducked, I hit the ground, and I pulled out my phone and I started recording. And so for anyone who's interested, you can find that video on my Twitter profile. It's at Wyatt Reed 13, and you can see that it's pinned to the top there. You can see the immediate aftermath where the car alarms are blaring. You can hear you can see obviously the smoke, and you can hear the broken glass, and you can see my immediate reaction to having gotten shelled, and me basically waiting to see if there was going to be a follow-up strike, and deciding at that point, after 30 so seconds perhaps, that I was going to be safer inside the hotel. So I made it in, and ended the video there. After that happened, I interacted with the security guard. I had a security there, and he wanted to usher me into a bomb shelter they have underneath the hotel. But I told him, obviously, I'm here to cover this. I can't be down in a bomb shelter, but just to be inside the structure felt a little bit reassuring. So that was that was my my experience, almost getting blown up by a 155 millimeter NATO standard, almost certainly U.S. produced artillery shell.
And before we get Wyatt Reed back on the line, we're going to play a track here. This is called Coro De Marcos by the group Los Zapatistas del Norte.
San Cristóbal de las Casas y otros pueblos aledaños, los cuales fueron tomados por el comandante Marcos. Ejército Zapatista, Liberación Nacional. Derribaron varios puentes, acceso a ese lugar, para evitar que pasara la defensa nacional. Tomaron como rehenes a un montón de ganaderos, unos en las Margaritas, otros en Altamirano, y a la selva Lacandona se lo llevan secuestrado. También allá en San Cristóbal sacan a todos los presos para unirse a la batalla y derrocar al gobierno. Así como a los maicitos hay que echarle agua y abono. Y así como el que nos oprime hay que echarle bomba y plomo. Sonaban las metralletas llamado cuerno de chivo. En la ciudad de Ocosingo, como a las 3 de la tarde, con la 31 zona y todos los federales. Más de 700 muertes quedaron en esos lugares. Civiles y zapatistas, también muchos federales, policías municipales, revuelto con judiciales. Ya con esta me despido, esto no va a terminar. La mecha sigue encendida, puede volver a estallar. Al subcomandante Marcos se lo pueden preguntar.
That was Coro De Marcos, performed by the group Los Zapatistas del Norte. Hi, Wyatt. We're back on the radio with Wyatt Reed of the Greyzone fame. Welcome back, Wyatt.
Thank you.
I actually, well, you wouldn't know because I haven't told you yet, but my father always says, it's a kind of a Canadian thing, I think. Anyway, I was in Chiapas back in the sometime in the early 90s, just before the Zapatista Revolucion. And I have fond memories of being in the town square in that beautiful ancient town. And then it just happened to be Cinco de Mayo, I think it was. And they had all these huge paper mache busts of like Uncle Sam. And then they were using them almost like piñatas. And then they would blow them up with fireworks. It was a rather extraordinary experience. I wanted to ask you, well, it's two-pronged question. First of all, I assume that when you go into a situation, whether it be in Bolivia or in Ukraine or wherever you go, that you generally go in as an unbiased observer to just report what you feel to be the truth. Second of all, I now know that you're on the so-called Mirotvet's Ukrainian kill list, along with other people like Roger Waters and probably Max Blumenthal and many others. And I'd like to ask you to respond to both those questions. First of all, about your journalistic approach, and second of all, about how it feels to be on a hit list.
Well, I'll answer the second one first. Not great. It doesn't feel great to be on a hit list, but I feel a little bit safer in the sense that, I don't make a habit of spending too much time in territory controlled by the Ukrainian government. I don't think that they would let me in. That list effectively functions as a checklist at border entry points. So I don't think I would really be able to go there. But I'm certainly alarmed by it on some sense. I don't think it affects me on a day-to-day basis, though. But the answer to the prior question, I think the best any journalist can aspire to is to show the reality, right? Show the reality. And the fact of the matter is, in terms of especially the coverage from Donetsk, from the Donbass, from territory that the Ukrainians refer to as separatist held, but these people who effectively rose up in 2014 after the U.S.-backed coup in the country, the Maidan so-called revolution, in which the United States government was openly complicit and directing the strings, and in fact hand-selecting the future government of that coup regime. The region where I reported from, my mission there was basically just to show the reality that other people won't, and that's what most journalists do. It's just that Western journalists mostly decide not to go there and do that. I managed to meet an Al Jazeera reporter there, but she worked for Al Jazeera Arabic, right? So, that's a Qatari government outlet, very reputable and very well funded and prestigious outlet, but they won't show their English-speaking audiences that perspective, but they're willing to show their Arabic-speaking audiences that perspective. And I think that speaks to a whole separate dynamic. But other than that, there are no Western journalists there in this territory, which you would think is kind of a scandal in its own right, because here it is, one of the most consequential areas of the entire war narrative, the entire war since 2014 in terms of the Ukrainian civil war. That's a central focal point for fighting in the ongoing war involving Russia. And they just choose not to cover this side. I chalk it up to basically a refusal to acknowledge those people's reality. They only want to show one side. And so I don't go in there with a preset objective. And I've been able to operate independently and, go out on my own with the translator and talk to whoever I wanted to talk to. And I just want to show, give people a chance to tell their stories. And overwhelmingly, the stories they told me there were that they didn't like the Ukrainian government, the one that put me on a kill list, the one that nearly killed me and blew up my hotel. And, I'm certainly sympathetic to that perspective, but I'm never going to, edit something out. And I'm a journalist first and foremost. I'm not going to rat somebody out because they tell me a contrary opinion. So I'm there to report what people's reality is, and I just happen to want to go show the reality that we're not being shown, and legacy mainstream media. And I think it's important. I think somebody needs to go to the other side and just check and just say, hey, this is what's happening. These people are not making it up. It's what's sorely lacking right now in coverage from Gaza, because there is no fuel. It's very difficult to get power. Journalists can't operate. Journalists are killed. There's a media blackout in a much more intense way going on right now in Gaza, for sure.
Well, you halfway through what you were just saying, I picked up on a term that rarely gets used in Western media, referring to the conflict in Ukraine as a civil war. I think it's, the general public and the media seem to have a very short memory span, and I think our governments count on that short memory span. But people cite the invasion of Ukraine by the Russians as a war crime, which technically, of course, it is. Yet there's little discussion about the origins of the conflict and the build-up to it, and the concept that this is really a civil war between two, not necessarily ethnic regions of Ukraine, although it is fairly well understood that the region where you were is traditionally more ethnically Russian, and the region to the west, certainly once you get towards Kiev or Kiev or whatever they like to call it, is more of a Christian sort of Western Eurocentric area, and I think that's an important distinction, quite honestly.
Well, Ukraine was always a bridge state, between West and East. It's composed, obviously, in the West of, as you said, very much more Catholic or non-religious, more Western sympathetic. Certainly, many of them consider themselves much more Western. Not insignificant portion of them consider themselves to be Aryan in a very Nazi sense. In the East, you have people who are much more Orthodox Christian, very, very mostly consider themselves Russian, especially in the East. In the North and the South, in kind of Zaporozhye, Kherson regions, Kharkiv, you get more into, 60-40, 50-50. But, in the East, it's certainly, those people, I never met people more pro-Russian patriotic than in East, quote unquote, Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wild. There are Russian flags everywhere. People just very, very pro-Russian, much, much more so than, in a city like Moscow. So that's the dynamic there. So this is a state that we're talking about that can only work if West and East have decided that they want to coexist peacefully. And, if you hear Western media tell it, everything in Ukraine began on,
March,
in February 2022.
22. Mm-hmm.
And just like everything in Gaza began October 7th, it all just started one day. And, the bad, evil guys decided to do something with no provocation. And, that's the side that we're getting told. And so I think it's important to go and investigate and, hear what the other side has to say. And, it's a shame that it's not more people doing it, but I understand it's tough out here for independent journalists. It's certainly not the most lucrative field.
Yeah, I think that's
get a lot more.
I think
get
that's
a lot more working for CNN. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely an understatement to say that. I know for sure. I have many friends that are journalists that they don't look at it as a hobby, obviously, but it's for all it's worth, it might as well be in terms of financial reward. But they do it anyway. I've had some great people on the show. I've had John Pilger on the show. I've had a guy named Dimitri Lascaris, who's a Canadian journalist.
Oh yeah.
Eva K. Bartlett. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Yeah,
anyway.
I met Eva actually the day after my hotel was shelled. She came and got breakfast with me.
She's an extraordinary person, really. And I'm proud to say she's a fellow Canadian too, so that kind of makes me feel better about my own government. Well, just when we thought things couldn't get a whole lot worse, obviously, what's happened over the past month and so with Israel and Gaza, it seems as though we go from one atrocity to another. And I just recently read your latest article in the Greyzone, which is entitled "Biden Administration Justifies Israel's Assault on Gaza Hospitals with Recycled Israeli Intelligence." And I'd like you to talk about that article and, kind of just expand on that particular piece.
Yeah, well, what's happening basically is the United States is doing what it historically has always done in this current siege of Gaza, which is to basically back up Israel. But it's going above and beyond even what it did during the Reagan years, during the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon, when President Reagan actually demanded Israeli troops cease fire, and was successful in doing so. Now the Biden administration is refusing to do that. It is refusing to intervene and refusing to stop the ongoing massacre, the nightly massacres of civilians in hospitals. And what it's doing is basically justifying these assaults by insisting that there are tunnels under the hospitals that Hamas is using to as command nodes, or as according to the United States, or as central command or command centers, if you hear the Israelis say it. No evidence of this has really surfaced, other than a handful of videos by the Israeli army, which have been pretty thoroughly debunked, have been called out by CNN of all sources as having apparently tampered with evidence. And even the BBC noted that they altered significantly, appeared to edit their footage in a deleted tweet in which they insisted they did not, and then edited out bits out from various videos. Have not really been willing to be forthcoming about the exact location of any of these supposed tunnels. Most of their videos seem to basically be disproven within 24 hours. But this is something which obviously the United States government has, again, been backing up, effectively perpetuating the Israeli government's narrative on. So we have earlier this week, on November 14th, the Pentagon spokeswoman basically confirmed this. She said that the United States has no there are no U.S. intelligence assets, and, quote, no boots on the ground inside Gaza, which is to say, as a journalist pointed out at the time during the briefing, which effectively means that they are taking the Israeli government's claims at face value. This was not something that Singh explicitly rejected. She kind of danced around it. But the underlying point there is that the United States has no real independent way of knowing what's happening in the hospitals in Gaza, and yet they are publicly stating left and right that their assessment is that there are, in fact, Hamas tunnels underneath these hospitals, even though all evidence seems to point to the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll just cap that by saying something that John Pilger said when I interviewed him. He said in his many years of experience as a journalist, the one thing that governments are very good at is making up stories. And I think that's a polite way of saying they lie for a living, practically. So we just have to...
Well,
sorry.
It's not just I was going to say, it's not just an indictment of them, and it's an indictment of the rest of the media. Fox News's Trey Yingst, in particular, accidentally documented the fact that the Israelis tampered with evidence and didn't even realize it. I mean, but it's also an indictment of all of these, so-called fact checkers, all of these, the quote unquote counter disinformation industry, all of these supposed experts who are supposed to be pointing out misinformation, disinformation. Where are they? We've had dozens of documented lies put out by the Israeli government over the past month. Over the past week, I documented the better part of a dozen lies, which from official Israeli social media accounts, which they subsequently deleted. And so, where are all of these fact checkers to point out what's going on, they seem to have disappeared. They were so prevalent, pointing out how much misinformation we've been getting fed in terms of Russia or, Ukraine. But now they've basically all disappeared. Everyone is basically MIA. We're witnessing the Nakba 2.0, as the Palestinians call it, the biggest ethnic cleansing of our time, the greatest war crime of our time. It's unfolding right before us. They're literally shooting up hospitals. Just in the hours before we were spoken, they were going in and kidnapping doctors and taking patients at gunpoint out of the Al Shifa hospital. So, where is the international condemnation? Where are, the so-called progressives in Congress, aside from a handful? And I will give, as you did, Rashida Tlaib credit for actually calling for a ceasefire and calling this out for what it is, which is war crimes. But then you have people like Bernie Sanders won't even call for a ceasefire. Why?
Very disappointing.
These people are supposed to be the anti-war candidates. They can't condemn the most biggest moral atrocity of our time. Then what can they do?
Well, it's frightening when the Prime Minister of Israel refers to a biblical term, Amalek, in his speech. It's basically something from the Old Testament, I think, which says to go out and basically slay all the women and children. And it's, I can't even, it's just so beyond me. We're back on the air with Wyatt Reed, Greyzone journalist, for a few more questions. I'm going to make a comment, Wyatt. I had to spend the last couple of weeks up in Canada, but while I was up there, I saw a speech by our governor. I don't know if you're a New York State person, but Kathy Hochul is our governor.
Right.
And she made a big talk. Seemed like she was kind of winging it off the top of her head. It was a bit discombobulated. But she's basically saying that they're going to enact more strict laws regarding hate speech. And I thought that was pretty ironic, maybe, because, for example, when right after the Grand Central Station shut down a couple of weeks back, Donald Trump referred to the protesters as jihadists and that they should all be deported. And I thought, well, 2/3 of those people protesting were Jewish. Where are you going to send them to? Florida? Like, I couldn't, and it just seems like any criticism, I'm being a little lighthearted about this, but it seems that any criticism of Israel and the American foreign policy is somehow getting pushed into this zone of being considered, quote, hate speech. And it just seems like the censorship, what we saw after 9/11 is kind of kicking in with more of these laws due to an extraordinary situation that the general public would not normally stand for. Yet under these circumstances, they managed to get away with things like the Patriot Act and whatnot, which essentially just is more infringements on free speech, in my opinion.
Well, you're exactly right. It's pretty clear now that flimsy allegations of anti-Semitism, which are really just allegations of criticizing the Israeli government, are going to be deployed to kind of shut people up. It seems to be something that the establishment and both sides of the government, establishment and big segments of what I thought were kind of the more populist right as well are signing on to, which is just, obviously this another attempt to chill free speech. And I think you're not wrong to compare it to Patriot Act era legislation, because we're kind of hitting a point of no return, it feels like, with the Palestinian issue particularly, where it's just there's such a huge divide between what normal people seem to think and about this issue and what the political elite says about this issue, between the propaganda being put out, this kind of barely believable stuff that our government is co-signing, as I note in this article, that gets totally raked through the coals on social media, and it's clear the youth isn't buying this. The youth isn't interested in the same kind of establishment narrative that the government and the complicit media outlets that are so close with them seem to give the Israeli government this kid glove treatment. But so we'll see if that pans out. I'm kind of hopeful. I'm always an optimist. I think people are kind of waking up on the Palestine issue, and I hope that they're willing to take that kind of realization about the vast gulf between the prescribed narrative and the reality, and take that analysis and apply it to every other foreign policy engagement that our ruling class has decided to get us into.
Well, I certainly hope so, because as is eminently obvious to me and many other people, we're really playing with a catastrophic situation, especially with Israel, who unofficially has nuclear weapons and has said that they would enact the, what is it called, a Hannibal something, or it's like as a, you probably know better what I'm talking about.
Well, the Hannibal Directive is an infamous army directive that the Israeli officials maintain, that effectively this has determined that it is preferable to have a Israeli militant who's been taken hostage, taken captive by the Palestinians. It is preferable to have that Israeli soldier killed than to allow them to be taken captive. That is effectively what the Hannibal Directive states. That is effectively Israeli government policy. And frankly, that's what we saw on October 7th. The Israeli outlet Haaretz has admitted as such that the Israeli police report has found that the Israeli helicopters actually took out a number of Israeli party goers, people who were celebrating a festival. Those Israelis were actually killed in large number by Israeli weapons. That finding totally exposes, obviously, the narrative that Hamas was running around blowing people up, burning people alive. No, all the people who were burned alive, as far as we can tell, were burned alive by Israeli hellfire strikes.
Yeah, I listened to Max Blumenthal discussing this whole issue of the casualty number that's roughly in the neighborhood of 1,200 Israelis that were killed on that day and a few subsequent days after. That number could be reduced by a third. It could be attributable to this doctrine. I mean, military checkpoints that were completely destroyed, for this exact same reason, which took out, innocent civilians as well, which is just. But back to my point about the dangers of a nuclear confrontation. I mean, I think, given the animosity between, for example, Israel and Iran, we're looking at something potentially catastrophic. We're looking at a potential catastrophic nuclear confrontation between the West and Russia, in Ukraine. And now we're sort of banging the drums of war with China, with Joe Biden referring to Xi Jinping as literally a dictator, which I don't think goes any direction towards healing international relations to use that sort of language. I mean, it's just,
It was so bizarre. What a bizarre event. And I mean, there's a clip that's now gone viral that shows Secretary of State Antony Blinken visibly cringing when Biden says this. Just you could see just the utter embarrassment on his face at Biden. And then it was again later in the speech, Biden is describing negotiations, Qatari-mediated negotiations, to help release the captives, and he kind of starts rambling a little bit, and he looks over again at Anthony Blinken and says, "Oh, I know, Mr. Secretary, I'm not supposed to be saying all that." It was just a bizarre kind of spectacle. He seems to be asking Blinken for permission. A very strange speech after they effectively rolled out the red carpet for the Chinese president. They cleaned up the streets of San Francisco. They did huge sweeps of homeless people and kicked them all out. And
wait a second,
they brought him.
Isn't that what they do in North Korea? Put up the false fronts like an old cowboy western town, and for the
Potemkin Village, as they used to refer to the Soviet displays.
Right. Exactly.
It's the same thing though they do during the Olympics too. Just briefer. I think it only lasted the duration of the visit. But so that was what they're doing. They turned San Francisco into Disneyland for him. President Xi of China is being feted by all the titans of industry, Tim Cook and the CEO of BlackRock, and all of these, massive movers and shakers are there crowding around, and Biden is insulting him. They basically, had this big party, invited him, and he called him a dictator. He fell for a gotcha question by a journalist, can barely, kind of grasp even the point of the visit, that he is ostensibly the one behind. No, it's very clear that there is a big gap between President Biden. It kind of validates what a lot of us have been saying about, who is really running the Biden administration, because it doesn't seem to be Joe Biden. He can barely string a sentence together half the time. He has trouble boarding airplanes. He really does not seem competent physically or mentally for the job. Who is actually pulling the strings? And now it kind of seems like, well, it's probably someone like Blinken and, Jake Sullivan. I'm sure the Clintons and Obama have their fingers in there somewhere too.
Then there's I won't say it on air, but I won't refer to them in any derogatory terms, but I will say Victoria Nuland and her husband.
If she's listening, nothing but the best. We're on air, right? Yeah, I don't think you're allowed to say what I really want to say. So we'll wish her the best instead.
Yeah, we'll just say all the best in your next life, because let's hope there is not a God in heaven. I just have to play the little 17-second station ID for legal purposes.
The opinions expressed on this program are those of the speaker or guest and do not necessarily reflect those of the management or staff of Radio Kingston WKNY, AM 1490, FM 1079, Kingston, New York.
Good timing, that one. Wyatt, before I let you go, I know you're probably fairly hyper-focused on what's going on in Gaza, but is there any other place in the world that you feel needs our attention that's not getting the kind of attention that should be required or deserves?
Well, certainly Latin America, all eyes always. I think that's kind of the big prize at the end of the day. So definitely going to be an interesting few weeks, especially in Argentina, where, as we noted, Javier Milei has won with a pretty sizable portion of the vote, somewhere around 56%, I think.
And what's his politics? Is he a very right-wing leaning person?
He is, hardcore kind of. He describes himself as, I think, a libertarian, but as a very pro-U.S. bent, and has pledged to radical deregulation. He wants to privatize Argentina's education, which is actually incredible. Our education system, I should say, as somebody who briefly was able to spend time at one of their schools as part of a 2-month exchange program. I am definitely encouraging listeners to, keep an eye on Latin America, because, again, I think the way the world is shifting, we're going to have our establishment trying to dominate Latin America pretty hard once again. So that's somewhere to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, I worry for Colombia, because apparently did they not just elect a fairly left-leaning government? I'm curious to see how long that'll be tolerated.
Yeah, well, he's definitely doing his best to kind of maintain friendly relations with the U.S. on a certain level, but he's also been fiercely condemning Israel for war crimes. If I'm not mistaken, he's used the terms crimes against humanity or even genocide in his description. He definitely doesn't mince words on the Palestine issue. So he's definitely been one of the more vocal presences, I should say, on the international stage when it comes to that issue. Definitely all eyes on Colombia too in that sense.
Well, I often wonder how Lula of Brazil manages to walk that tightrope. And I know there's a bunch of countries that have cut off diplomatic relations with Israel. I don't know if Bolivia is one of them, but
Bolivia, as far as I'm aware, is the main country that cut diplomatic relations. Several other Latin American nations recalled their ambassadors, and I believe withdrew some diplomatic staff as well. But as far as I'm aware, Bolivia is the only one that I read about. But I know, a number of other Latin American states, and I think South Africa as well, withdrew their ambassador from Israel.
Okay. Well, Wyatt, I'm very grateful for you to dedicate a bit of time with us on the show, and I'd love to have you back in a few months for a follow-up. And you're welcome to listen in. I'm going to play, as we go out, a track by a beautiful human being by the name of Rinbana, who's a Palestinian singer. And the track is called "The Night Has Fallen Down" from her album Seasons of Violet. So for those in the audience who've been listening, you were listening to an interview with Wyatt Reed from the Greyzone. And please follow him on Twitter or X. I can't get that through my head. On X at Wyatt Reed 13. Thank you very much, Wyatt. Be well.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
واتقفلت الابواب صار الغريب يلتجي من باب لباب امسى المسايا غريب واتفتحت الجراح يا عين لا خدني معاك بفطر على دقاك بصبر على الجوع ما بصبر على الفرقان سافر وخدني معاك بفطر على دقاك بصبر على الجوع ما بصبر على الفرقان والصبر أخدته معي خبيته بعيوني عفراق أهلي يا يما بالله لا تلوموني والصبر أخدته معي خبيته بعيوني عفراق أهلي يا يما بالله لا تلوموني يا كاتب الورقة واكتب حواشيها سلم على البلد يلا أحبابنا فيها يا كاتب الورقة اكتب ومليها وسلم على الديري لأحبابنا فيها سافر وخدني معاك بفطر على دقاك بصبر على الجوع ما بصبر على الفرقان سافر وخدني معاك بفطر على دقاك بصبر على الجوع ما بصبر على الفرقان جمال خدني معك والله البعد حرقان بصبر على الجور ما بصبر على الفرقان جمال خدني معك والله البعد حرقان بصبر على الجور ما بصبر على الفرقان المسايا غريب
Yeah. Y'all ready? Yeah. Philistine. Touchdown, Palestine. Y'all ready? Philistine. Touchdown.
Come on, boy, hey.
Touchdown, let's go, hey.
Start the day feeling blessed, so I hit him, I connect. Then I go and cut the check, book the jet, then it's touchdown, Palestine. Summertime, bring the gang down, Palestine. Summertime, ayy. Start the day feeling blessed, so I hit him, I connect. Then I go and cut the check, book the jet, then it's touchdown, Palestine. Summertime, bring the gang down, Palestine. Summertime, ayy.
Kiata B, they know I'm bout it. Inspiring my people by the thousands. Red, white, black, green, all over my outfit. Reppin' Palestine, more than DJ Khaled.
I can never live to see him suffer. Shout us to Wahib, yeah, linking up my brothers. They cannot oppress us, we know that God's above them. Feeding on my people, all the children, man, we gonna. Yeah, music for humanity, we kill it with a message. Do it for the family, I'm still forever repping. نتاج الحرية في بلاد العربية. Got the gang all with me and we rockin' that kafia. Then we do the depth kick, let the drums bang. Then we hit up Al-Quds on a Friday. Black boy in Philistine, that's a blessed thing. I'ma bring the east side to the west bank. Start the day feeling blessed, so I hit 'em, I connect. Then I go and cut the check, book the jet, then it's touchdown, Palestine. Summertime, bring the gang down, Palestine. Summertime, ayy. Start the day feeling blessed, so I hit 'em, I connect. Then I go and cut the check, book the jet, then it's touchdown, Palestine. Summertime, bring the gang down, Palestine. Summertime, ayy.
My people dying and the media is blocking us from seeing it and hearing it because they're bombarding us. Think about the refugees, that's what the departure does. We are targets and you are disregarding us. See, regardless of the pain, I'ma start it up. Me and J. Dean gon' start it up. I got all my Palestinians guarding us, and we only speak the truth, so pardon us. Got the kufiya on my headband, gotta represent, man. Hit up Times Square and we just dance. Hit the depka for the culture like I'm supposed to. Rep it red, white, black, green till the death, man. تعال معي يلا رايحين على رام الله. Tryna go to Palestine, you know who to call up. Chi-Town, NY to the north side. If you ain't rocking with us, you on the wrong side.
Start the day feeling blessed, so I hit 'em, I connect. Then I go and cut the check, book the jet, then it's touchdown, Palestine. Summertime, bring the gang down, Palestine. Summertime, yeah. Start the day feeling blessed, so I hit 'em, I connect. Then I go and cut the check, book the jet, then it's touchdown, Palestine. Summertime, bring the gang down, Palestine. Summertime, yeah.
Y'all ain't ready for this one.
Summertime, yeah. Touchdown, Palestine.
Hey, hey, hey.
Touchdown, Palestine. Got the gang.
Chi-Town.
Touchdown, Palestine.
Let me be a free man, free to travel, free to stop, free to trade where I choose, free to choose my own teachers, free to follow the religion of my fathers, free to talk, think, and act for myself, and I will obey every law or submit to the penitent. Chief Joseph, 1870.
Get free, lamb to the slaughter. What you gon' do when there's blood in the water? The price of your greed is your son and your daughter. What you gon' do when there's blood in the water? Look me in my eyes, tell me everything I find. All the people ain't happy, and the river has run dry. You thought you could go free, but the system is done. If you listen real closely, there's a knock at your front door. You'll never get free, lamb to the slaughter. What you gon' do when there's blood in the water? The price of your greed is your son and your daughter. What you gon' do when there's blood in the water? When there's blood in the water. Just for another dollar in your pocket. Now I am the violence, I am the sickness. Won't accept your silence, beg me for forgiveness. We'll never get free, lamb to the slaughter. What you gonna do when there's blood in the water? The price of your greed, your son and your daughter. What you gonna do when there's blood in the water? When there's blood in the water.
On with the show. Before that break, we heard, what did we hear? We heard Grandson with Blood, Water from the album Modern Tragedy. Before that, we heard a little snippet of Russell Means reciting an eloquent piece of writing by Chief Joseph from the album The Radical. And before that, we heard Touchdown Palestine by Wahib Nassan and Jadine. And to start that little set off, we heard The Night Has Fallen Down by Rimbana. Speaking of radicals and revolutionaries, I thought I'd play a track here called The track is called Colonial Mentality from the album The Best of the Black President. Of course, that wouldn't be none other than Fela Kuti.
Colo mentality.
If you say you be colonial man, you don't be slave man before. They don't release you now, but you never release yourself.
I say you fit in, never release yourself. Colo mentality.
If you say you be colonial man, you don't be slave man before.
They don't release you now, but you never release yourself. It be so. It be so. Them they do, them they overdo all the things that them they do.
It be so.
It be so. Them they do, them they do, them they overdo all the things that them they do.
It be so.
It be so. Them they do, them they think is that they better pass them, brother. No be so.
It be so.
It be so. Them they do, them they think is that they better pass them, brother. No be so.
It be so.
The thing with black no good. Now foreign things them they like it. No be so.
It be so.
The thing with black no good. Now foreign things them they like it. No be so.
It be so.
Them go turn your condition and close them country away. No be so.
It be so.
Them go turn your condition and close them country away. No be so.
It be so.
Them judge him go cocky weak and jail him brother away. No be so.
It be so.
Them judge him go put him weak and jail him brother away. No be so.
It be so.
Them go proud of them name and put them slave name for heading. No be so.
It be so.
Them go proud of them name and put them slave name for heading. No be so.
It be so.
Color mentality now make you hear me now. It's a ransom me make you hear. It's a Williams me make you hear. It's a Aliyah me make you hear. It's a Muhammad me make you hear. It's a Anglican me make you hear. It's a Bishop me make you hear. It's a Catholic me make you hear. It's a Muslim me make you hear. The Africa we devil make you hear. The Africa we devil make you hear. Color mentality here. Color mentality here. It's a ransom me make you hear. It's a ransom me make you hear. The Africa we devil make you hear. The Africa we devil make you hear. Color mentality here. Color mentality here.
There's a rhythm and rush these days where the lines don't move and the colors don't fade. Leaves you empty with nothing but dreams. In a world gone shallow, in a world gone mean. Sometimes there's things a man cannot know. The gears won't turn and the leaves won't grow. There's no place to run and no gasoline. Engine won't turn and the train won't leave. Engines won't turn and the train won't leave. I will stay with you tonight. Hold you close till the morning light. In the morning watch the new day rise. We'll do whatever just to stay alive. We'll do whatever just to stay alive. Well, the way I feel is the way I ride. Racing like the thoughts of a man who lies. There is a truth and it's on our side. Dawn is coming, open your eyes. Look into the sun as a new day's rise. And I will wait for you tonight. You're here forever and you're by my side. I've been waiting all my life. Can feel your heart as it's keeping time. Do whatever just to stay alive. Dawn is coming, open your eyes. 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 Look into the sun as a new day's rise. There's a rhythm and rush these days where the lines don't move and the colors don't fade. Leaves you empty with nothing but dreams. In a world gone shallow, in a world gone mean. But there is a truth and it's on our side. Dawn is coming, open your eyes. Look into the sun as a new day's rise.
That was a track called Stay Alive by Jose Gonzalez from the album Stay Alive. Before that, we heard Ransom Felakuti from the album The Best of the Black President, with a track called Colonial Mentality. And, you are listening to The Long Way Round. I'm your host, Malcolm Byrne. For the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to take out the rest of the show with some more music from my handy playlist that I carefully put together each week for this program. I'm going to play a track by a Brazilian singer, songwriter Seyu with the track called Concrete Jungle.
Check, 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 gung check, check, gung check, gung check, 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 gung check, check, gung check, gung check, check, gung check, check. No sun will shine in my day today. No sun will shine. The high yellow moon won't come out to play. Won't come out to play. Darkness has covered my light and has changed my day into night. Now where is this love to be found? Won't someone help me? 'Cause life must be somewhere to be found. Instead of concrete jungle, where the living is highest. A concrete jungle, man, you've got to do your best. No chains around my feet, but I'm not free. I know I am bound here in captivity. And I've never known happiness. I've never known sweet caresses till I've been always laughing like a clown. Won't someone help me? 'Cause I got to pick myself from off the ground. In this here concrete jungle, say what do you got for me now? A concrete jungle, oh why won't you let me be now? I said life must be somewhere to be found. Instead of concrete jungle, maybe we got it. Concrete jungle, maybe we got it. Concrete jungle.
Sometimes I need left alone to deal with things. So one of these things? Is it on your conscience? She's more than a flame. And is it true you've placed your curse upon my newest bit of strange? And is there a new knot being tied in your longest piece of string? No, nothing good can come of ankle shackles, a ball and chain. No, nothing good will come to you. If my arrest is as good as change, sometimes I need left alone to deal with them. So what if she's one of these things? Sometimes I need left alone to deal with them. So what if she's one of these things? Sometimes I need left alone to deal with them. So what if I'm one of these Sometimes I need left alone to deal with them. So what if I'm one of these Sometimes I need left alone to deal with them. So what if I'm one of these things? Sometimes Sometimes I need left alone to deal with her.
You're listening to a track by Kenny Anderson, otherwise known as King Creosote, called Ankle Shackles from the album That Might Be It, Darling. And that's it for tonight's show. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for Freedom Highway with your host, Nick Pankin, coming up right after this. Special shout out to my fabulous producer, Liz Hill. Thank you, as always. I don't know what I'd do without you. And if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise, see you next week. Take care.